I'm an alien.
When I first sat down to watch Yorgos Lanthimos Bugonia, I thought I was walking into a quirky dark comedy about a conspiracy theorist and his kidnapping plot. What I got instead was a complete paradigm shift in how I think about extraterrestrial beings in modern cinema. And honestly, that's exactly what makes this film so fascinating. Today, we're going to talk about something that completely captivated the Andromedan aliens and everything they represent, their anatomy, their culture, their philosophy, and why they believe they have the right to judge humanity itself. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I know who you are.
Understanding the Andromedan. Who are these beings? The Andromedans, as revealed in Bugonia, aren't your typical extraterrestrial antagonists. They're not here to invade Earth in the traditional sense, or harvest resources like we've seen in countless sci-fi films. No, these beings operate on an entirely different level. They're sophisticated, almost transcendent in their approach to planetary management. They come from the Andromeda galaxy, and they've been watching humanity for ages. What makes the Andromedans truly exceptional is how they operate from a position of absolute certainty regarding their superiority. They're cold, calculating observers who see themselves as higher-order beings looking down at a failed experiment. And that's where it gets creepy, because they're not wrong about a lot of it. The physical form. What do Andromedans look like? The Andromedans possess the remarkable ability to perfectly mimic human form, which is essentially why they've been able to infiltrate human society so seamlessly. Michelle Fuller, the protagonist played by Emma Stone, is an Andromedan, the actual empress of her species, and for most of them, she moves among humans completely undetected. Why? Because her physical form is indistinguishable from ours. But here's the catch. There are specific physiological markers that distinguish them from human. The most crucial one involves their hair. Now, I know that sounds strange, but this is actually central to understanding Andromedan anatomy. Their hair serves a completely different biological function than human hair. For Andromedans, hair is essentially a neurobiological communication system. It's not just dead keratin like ours. Instead, it functions as an antenna or transmission medium through which they communicate telepathically with their technology, their ships, and each other across vast distances. This is so well thought out in the film's design. When Teddy captures Michelle and shaves her head, he's essentially disconnecting her from her entire communication infrastructure. She can't reach her ship. She can't contact her people. She can't access Andromedan technology. It's a form of technological castration. And the fact that this detail turns out to be completely accurate shows just how carefully the Andromedans have evolved to interface with technology through biological means. Beyond the hair adaptation, Andromedans appear to have virtually identical skeletal and muscular structures to humans. They breathe our air. They eat our food. They exist in our environment without difficulty. This is intentional. A deliberate design choice by a species that wanted to move through human society completely unnoticed. From what we see in the film, there's almost no perceptible difference in their basic physical appearance unless you're looking for the specific anatomical marker. And even then, most people wouldn't know what they're looking at. Neurological and psychological differences. Andromedans appear to lack something fundamental that defines humanity: emotional investment in individuals or species beyond strategic purpose. Michelle's character demonstrates this throughout the film. She's described as having a certain perfection in her social interaction that's distinctly off. Not quite right. There's an emptiness there, a detachment that's unsettling precisely because it's so subtle. She doesn't process human suffering the way we do when she's confined, tortured, and threatened by Teddy and Dawn. There's a psychological flexibility to her that suggests her mind works differently than ours. She can compartmentalize, strategize, and manipulate without the emotional interference that typically plagues human cognition. This is more like an evolutionary difference. Andromedans have evolved beyond emotional attachment to individual organisms. Their intelligence also appears to exceed human intelligence markedly. Michelle can understand complex pharmaceutical science, understand human psychology well enough to manipulate and coordinate interstellar operations. But more important, her ability to calculate outcomes and make dispassionate decisions based purely on data suggests a cognitive architecture fundamentally different from ours. They think in systems and species-level outcomes rather than individual experiences. Andromedan technology, the marks of an advanced civilization. Now, when we talk about Andromedan technological superiority, we're talking about a civilization so far ahead of us that our best efforts look like children playing with rocks. The most visible manifestation of this in the film is their teleportation technology, which they've cleverly disguised as something as mundane as a closet in a corporate office. But think about what that implies. They've mastered instantaneous transportation across galactic distances. They can move between Earth and their mothership, located in the Andromeda galaxy, through what appears to be localized quantum portal. And then there's the calculator. I love this detail because it's so deceptively simple. Michelle uses what appears to be a retro 2000s era calculator to input the codes necessary for teleportation. Why a calculator? Because Andromedans are so advanced that they've engineered their technology to be hidden in plain sight. What looks like ancient human technology to us is actually an interface layer for something so sophisticated we can't even comprehend it. It's like giving a smartphone to a medieval peasant and having them try to figure out what it does by pressing buttons. The mothership itself, referred to as Oxolid, which is also the name of the pharmaceutical company Michelle fronts, contains monitoring and surveillance capability that allow the Andromedans to observe human activity from orbit. They can track individuals, monitor communication, and assess the overall trajectory of human civilization. Inside the mothership, they have scientific equipment capable of genetic experimentation on a species-wide scale. They've essentially been running a long-term experiment on humanity, and they have the data infrastructure to back it up. The origins of humanity. Creation myth meets genetic engineering. This is where the Andromedans reveal their origin story for humanity, and it's absolutely chilling. According to Michelle's explanation, the Andromedan arrived on Earth in the distant past. We're talking dinosaur era. When they arrived, they inadvertently wiped out the dinosaur. Now, rather than leaving the planet and abandoning it as dead, they had another idea: create a new intelligent species to populate the planet. That species? Us. But here's the thing. Humanity wasn't created random. Humans were engineered by the Andromedan. We're not accidentally evolved apes. We're a carefully designed product of Andromedan bioengineering. This is where their philosophy becomes really relevant. They created us as an experiment. They wanted to see if they could seed intelligence and consciousness on a planet and observe how that civilization would develop. From the Andromedan perspective, this is an act of tremendous magnanimity, or a world they just devastated, and populated it with conscious beings capable of creating art, science, and meaning. They watched us develop language, create civilization, and build society. And then they watched us almost destroy ourselves repeatedly with warfare, cruelty, and environmental destruction. Andromedan philosophy, the superiority framework. The core of Andromedan philosophy rests on what I'd call observational determinism. They believe that consciousness and intelligence are measurable quantity, and some species have more of them than others. Andromedans place themselves at the absolute apex of this hierarchy. Their advancement in science, technology, and ethics is so complete that they view themselves as custodians of universal order. What's particularly fascinating and disturbing is that their philosophy includes a non-interference doctrine up until the point where they determine that intervention is necessary. For millions of years, they've observed humanity, run experiments on them, introduced new people with Andromedan DNA into our society to observe how hybrid societies might develop, and generally acted as quiet observers. But they've done all this while maintaining a strict baseline of ethical superiority. In their worldview, ethics are objective and measurable. They've determined that humanity has failed to meet the minimum ethical standards required to continue existing as a species. Our self-destructiveness, our cruelty to each other, our environmental devastation, our capacity for causing suffering to ourselves and other species. These are all objective failures to achieve the ethical development that a created species should have achieved. The Andromedans see themselves not as invaders, but as gardeners. A gardener doesn't need to justify pulling up weeds. Weeds aren't capable of understanding the justification anyway, and the gardener has the right to determine what should exist in their garden. That's essentially the Andromedan framework. Humanity is a failed crop, and they have both the power and the right to remove it. Knowledge, advancement, and scientific achievement. The Andromedans have transcended the limitations that we will struggle with. Their knowledge of biology allows them to understand human physiology so completely that they can move through our society without detection. Their understanding of genetics is so sophisticated that they can create viable hybrid organisms. Their physics is so advanced that they've solved problems we don't even know exist yet. What's particularly interesting is that their advancement appears to be cumulative over unfathomable timescale. The Andromedans have been observing Earth for what they suggest is millions of years. Imagine the technological development you could achieve with that kind of time frame. We've gone from horse-drawn carriages to smartphones in about a century and a half. The Andromedans have had millions of years to compound their technological achievement. But beyond raw capability, there's a philosophical aspect to Andromedan knowledge advancement. They appear to have solved the energy requirements for interstellar travel. They've conquered disease and aging. Michelle appears no older than any other human despite being an empress, with access to historical knowledge spanning millennia. They've developed systems that allow them to terraform and modify planets. They've achieved a form of biological-technological integration through interfaces like the hair-based communication system we discussed earlier. Andromedan weaknesses, the chinks in their cosmic armor. Despite all their technological prowess and superiority, the Andromedans do have vulnerability, and understanding these weaknesses is absolutely crucial to comprehending why they're not completely invulnerable. The most significant weakness is their dependence on their hair-based neural communication system. This is both their greatest strength and their Achilles heel. When Teddy shaves Michelle's head, he's completely isolating her from Andromedan technology and communication infrastructure. Without her hair, she can't contact the mothership, she can't access their teleportation technology, and she cannot coordinate with other Andromedans. It's like cutting the umbilical cord between an astronaut and their space station. This vulnerability suggests that Andromedans, for all their advancement, have evolved in a way that makes them utterly dependent on a specific biological system that can be disrupted by surprisingly simple means. The second vulnerability relates to their physical and the toll of maintaining their human disguise. While Andromedans are clearly not susceptible to traditional human diseases, they can breathe our air and consume our food without issue. The act of integrating into human society requires them to function within certain limitations. Michelle can be knocked unconscious by an explosion. She can be restrained, imprisoned, and tortured by humans. This suggests that while their minds operate at a higher level than ours, their bodies are not inherently more durable than human bodies. They've designed themselves to be compatible with Earth, which means they've also made themselves vulnerable to Earth-based threat. They bleed. They can be physically harmed, and presumably, they can be killed through conventional means, though whether they age and die naturally or possess extended lifespan remains ambiguous in the film. Andromedan reproduction, the mystery of genetic continuity. Now, here's where it gets genuinely mysterious, because the film doesn't explicitly explain how Andromedans reproduce. However, we can infer several possibilities based on what we see. Michelle is referred to as the Andromedan Empress, which suggests a hierarchical society with distinct roles and bloodline. The existence of an empress implies that there's some form of succession, which could indicate traditional reproduction with royal lineage. But considering their mastery of genetic engineering, demonstrated by their ability to create humans and presumably other species, it's entirely possible that Andromedans don't reproduce sexually in the way we do. The most likely scenario, given their technological sophistication, is that Andromedans practice a form of controlled genetic reproduction, essentially cloning or asexual reproduction. This would allow them to maintain genetic consistency within their population while avoiding the complications of sexual reproduction. An empress like Michelle could be either the original founder of their civilization or a clone, specifically designed or selected to lead. The fact that they possess the ability to create entirely new intelligent species from scratch suggests they've mastered genetic engineering to a degree where traditional biological reproduction might be considered primitive or inefficient. This method of reproduction also aligns with their psychological detachment and their ability to make dispassionate decisions about entire species. If Andromedans reproduce asexually or through carefully controlled genetic engineering, they might not experience the evolutionary pressures that drive humans to form emotional bonds, create family, or value individual lives. Their reproduction method could be entirely utilitarian, engineered to produce exactly what their society needs when it needs it. This would explain their cultural uniformity and their ability to achieve complete consensus on matters like the termination of humanity. There's no genetic diversity creating conflicts of interest, no family rivalry, no competing bloodline pushing for different outcomes, just pure biological efficiency in service of their societal goal. The Andromedans' immortality, or extended lifespan, is another intriguing question raised but not definitively answered by the film. Michelle appears to have access to the history of Atlantis, suggesting she either lived through those ancient times or possesses genetic memory or historical record. If Andromedans do possess extended lifespans or even functional immortality through medical technology or genetic design, this further reinforces their sense of superiority over humanity to a species that lives for thousands or millions of years. The 100-year human lifespan would seem inconsequential. Our entire civilization would rise and fall within what constitutes childhood for an Andromedan. That perspective shift alone could explain their philosophical framework of cosmic guardianship. From their point of view, they're not destroying a civilization. They're simply clearing away a failed project from millions of years ago that should have been discarded long ago. The culture of judgment and cosmic accountability. Here's what really sets Andromedans apart in terms of culture. They've internalized the role of cosmic judge and executioner. It's not something they do reluctantly or with ambivalence. It's a core part of their cultural identity. They believe that they have the right and responsibility to determine which species deserves to continue existing. They believe they have the right and responsibility to determine which species deserve to continue existing. This is the fascinating, horrifying duality at the heart of Bugonia. The Andromedans genuinely believe they're trying to help. In Michelle's final consultation with her people, before she makes her decision about humanity, she's not having a debate, she's processing data. Andromeda. They're reviewing the results of their experiment and reaching a logical conclusion. From their perspective, they're not committing genocide. They're terminating a failed project. What makes this culturally significant is that Andromedan society appears to have achieved complete consensus on these matters. There's no debate, no minority voice arguing for humanity's survival, no rebel faction suggesting a different approach. The Andromedans have created a civilization where such disagreements don't exist because they've reached a level of rational agreement on all fundamental issues, whether that's through actual consensus or through a form of mind control or social pressure. We don't know, but the result is a unified culture with a unified purpose. The final judgment, putting theory into practice. In the climax of Bugonia, we see Andromedan philosophy move from theory to practice. After Michelle returns to her mothership and consults with her council, she makes a decision. Humanity must be terminated. She walks over to a model Earth, this beautiful, fragile representation of our entire species and civilization, pops the bubble containing it. The result is instantaneous death for every human on the planet. Pain, no suffering, no extended dying, just immediate cessation. It's almost merciful in its efficiency, which somehow makes it even more unsettling. This is Andromedan mercy, the quick execution rather than prolonged suffering. What's culturally significant about this ending is that it demonstrates the Andromedans' actual value. They're not nihilistic destroyer aliens. They're not evil in a traditional sense. They simply believe that some experiments must be terminated for the greater good of the universe. They believe that they have the knowledge, the moral authority, and the technological capability to make these determinations, and therefore they have the right to do so. The Andromedans have evolved beyond questioning their own righteousness, and that's maybe the most dangerous thing about them. Why this matter? The cultural commentary. The brilliance of Bugonia is that the Andromedans aren't a sci-fi threat that exists in some distant future. They're a mirror. They represent what a civilization might become when it achieves absolute technological superiority without developing compassion to match that capability. They're what happens when a species reaches a point where it can make a life or death decision. They're what happens when a species reaches a point where it can make life or death decision about entire population and has the intellectual framework to justify those decisions as not just acceptable, but necessary. The Andromedans embody a chilling form of cultural supremacy, dressed up in rational language and justified through scientific authority. They've created a self-reinforcing system where their superiority justifies their right to judge, and their judgment reinforces their sense of superiority. Marvelous verdict, an alien anatomy and philosophy that haunt. So in a nutshell, here's what we learned about Andromedan anatomy and culture from Bugonia. Physically, they're evolved to perfectly mimic human, with the crucial difference being their hair-based neural communication system. Psychologically, they lack the emotional attachment that constrains human decision-making. Technologically, they've advanced far beyond our comprehension, with capabilities like instantaneous teleportation that seem like magic to us. Culturally, they've created a civilization based on objective measurement of capability and merit, which they've used to justify a form of cosmic guardianship over lower species. Believe they created humanity and have the right to terminate their creation if it fails to meet their standard. And the truly horrifying thing is that their framework is internally consistent and logically sound. That's what makes them so terrifying as aliens. Not that they're irrational, but that they're perfect, coldly rational in the decision to eliminate. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this unique alien species and the movie that blends such a serious concept with dark comedy. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.